last week. We looked at life cycle costing, quite simple, series of payments of €120 over, I believe it was 25 years. The yearly values across the top. On the left hand side here we have our total costs, whether those costs are realized as today's money, escalated costs, which is essentially nominal costs as well, and present value costs. So clicking on the second exercise here, very similar, as in the calculations are very similar, but the presentation is a little bit different. We've got our costs across the top, and now I know there's a lot of costs there, I'll explain them in a minute, and we've got our yearly values going vertically down the column. This is an exercise which compares the costs of installing a rainwater harvesting system versus not installing the rainwater harvesting system. So again, it could be an exercise or template that could be used for any sort of renewable technology, be it solar panels, photovoltaics, air source heat pumps, or whatever you might be using to compare the option of not putting it in versus the option of putting it in terms of your energy savings or your charges. So in the case of the rainwater harvesting system, I'll do the right hand side calculation here first, which is the installation cost version, and the different charges and maintenance costs that goes with that, and then we'll just use those calculations for the simple not installing calculation, which is just a fixed water charge. Okay, we're going to use something different here. We're going to use, instead of using the straightforward, I suppose, formula for escalated costs, which is 1 plus e to the power of n, or the single present value formula, which is 1 over 1 plus the discount rate to the power of n. I'm going to use these power functions. So that was something we did in the very first tutorial. If I click back when we were calculating the different ways of doing life cycle costing. So there was the power calculation. Now how we use the minus or plus sign here in the actual power to the power of will determine whether we're using the present value calculation or the escalated calculation. So you can see it there. So if you put in minus to the power of whatever number that is, that will do the discounting as opposed to just leaving it as a positive, will give you the escalation. So let's start off. What we got is we've got an installation cost here of 5,400 in year 0. So that's our capital cost, and because we're not dealing with the time series value of money, it'll just stay the same as in capital cost, escalated cost, and present value. They will all be the same cost because they're all starting from the same year, which is today. They're not escalating, they're not discounting because it's year 0. So our present value, escalated cost, and our capital cost in real costs, our base cost, is 5,400. So we're just going to leave that as is. I've left it there for you. I'm going to give you this template. The first calculation we're going to do here is the escalated maintenance cost. Now the way this is working is to install the rainwater harvesting system, we're going to have obviously the installation costs, but based on the installation of that particular system, we'll have a yearly maintenance cost of €100. We'll have certain things that we'll need to replace at certain time periods. So the first year we've got €20 worth of work to do, the second year 70, the next year 20, the next year 78, the next year 20, the next year 520, and then that kind of series of payments starts again in year 7 and then again in year 13. So there's a cycle of, I suppose, system replacements and maintenance, what they call planned preventative maintenance, PPM, to be done over the study period, which in this case is 30 years. Then we actually got the running costs. So again, for a rainwater harvesting system, I believe there's a little bit of electricity that needs to be used for a filtering system or whatnot, and that's also €100 a year. And then we got the water charges. So even though we've got these additional costs, you can see that our water charges in this exercise are only €50 a year, whether the water charges, now this is a bit excessive, but it's just an example, for the year when we don't install the system is €650. Okay, so again, I'm going to do a little bit here and you're pretty much going to finish it out, and then I'll come back to it then once you've it done, and we'll do some charts and we'll do some accumulated costs. So starting with the first cell, so leave the capital cost, it's only a one-off payment, there's nothing going to be in the yearly values below that. In year 1, when we've installed the system, we've got €100 of maintenance cost. Now we're going to escalate that first, and that's what that column, escalated maintenance cost. And as I said before, we could use a couple of different formulas, but I'm going to try the power one in this exercise, just to show you something different. So again, equals to the power, open brackets. So what are we doing in terms of to the power? Well, the number we're going to use is the 1. So I'm going to click a brackets, plus, and it is the escalation rate. And then I'm going to close my brackets to the power of what number? The first year. And then I'm going to close my brackets. So you can see the way the brackets is working there. I use those kind of internal brackets in this case because I was kind of adding 1 plus 3%, which is 1.03, which is essentially what I'm looking for because it's escalating. Otherwise, it will return a fraction of that 100 euro. I wanted to add the percentage to the 100 euro, so that's why I'm using the 1 plus, and then to the power of PV. And then I'm going to multiply that by the cost. Okay, so that's our formula. And click insert. So we've done that before, and logically it should be 103 because it's escalation rate of 1 year at 3%. 100 euro to 103 euro. So if you add 3% to 100 euro, you're going to get 103 euro, which makes sense. Now, if I started pulling this down like I've showed you before, or across in the last number of cases, but down in this case, because I want to move that formula down, it won't work. I get these value in irregular calculations. And the reason being is because I didn't lock any cells or rows. So I just click that next cell there. You can see that it's come down. That's okay. But what should have been up there in my escalation rate has also moved down in terms of the actual formula linked to the cell. So I need to actually lock some rows, lock some cells. So I'll just delete what I've done there. And I'm going to go back up to my formula, double click it to show it, or I can use it up here and see the AC2. Well, the AC2 is my percentage, and no matter what I do, no matter what cell I use for escalation, I want to link to that cell, AC row 2. So I'm just going to lock that by highlighting it and pressing F4. So $AC, $2 locks the cell. And I also want to lock this column, because otherwise if I pull this and use these in different columns, it'll pull that column across and it won't give me to the power of 1. So instead of locking the row, which would be the row and column, which would be $P, $5, I'm just going to lock the column. So I'm just going to put a little dollar, hopefully this will work, in front of P, but leave the dollar out of in front of 5, leave the or 5 as is, and click return. So that's 103. Now if I pull down these costs, it should work, and it is. So you, when you're doing this exercise, can fill the rest of that down by pulling it all the way down, and you won't have to calculate each particular cell. Okay, so I've also got replacement costs that need to be escalated. So hopefully if I copy that formula and paste it in here, so paste, and double click just to see that everything's working okay. So yes, it's the replacement cost to the power of, lock that cell, and it's the T5 this time. So that's okay. Do the same for the next one. Copy, paste in there, and that would be right, correct, because if that was 100, 103, 100, 103, and then copy the next one in. And that looks to be okay too. So it's to the power of 1 plus 3% to the power of 1 multiplied by x5, and that brings us up to 50.5. And now I want to add those together, so equals all my escalated costs there we have a total escalated cost of 278.10 euro. So if I add all my escalated costs at the end of that first year of, I suppose, running the system, I've got 278.10. Now again, as I said, because I locked those cells, I could pull them all the way down, and you can do that too. So by highlighting the cell bottom right hand corner, changing to a crosshair. We should be getting used to this now. Pushing down on our left key button, our left mouse key button, and release. And that will go all the way down. Now I'm not doing it, you guys are going to do it, and see how it works out for you. So there I've done the first, I suppose, number of years for all my escalated costs, and that one should go too. Okay, so you can see that it's adding there, adding across each applicable row. Okay, so the next calculation here is to discount my escalated costs. Okay, so I've total 278.10. That is each of those escalated costs, escalated to the end of the first year. Now I'm going to discount that back as a whole value. So I'm going to use my power calculation again, equals power. This is quite similar. Brackets, and then another internal brackets, 1, because I'm using this number, plus the discount rate, brackets, to the power of that 1. Close brackets, multiplied by the escalated costs. Now there's something I need to do here a little bit different than the last calculation, where I use this formula, is I need to put minus P5 in, because I'm discounting this as opposed to escalating it. So I'm using the same calculation, this power functionality or function in Excel, but in this case I'm using a discount formula as opposed to an escalated formula, and that's how I would change that. So hopefully this will work. Click OK. So now that 264.90 has discounted back from 278 to 264. So if I pull that down a little bit, it should work. Oh, well, it won't work because there's one thing I didn't do, and I didn't put the dollar in front of the P to lock the column. Oh, sorry, I didn't put the AC. I didn't lock the cell. That was what's happening. And then I'll also lock the column. There we go. That didn't work because if I double click the next one, it pulled down the 5% to 3%, so it wasn't working. And then when I moved down to the next one, it pulled it into that cell, so it wasn't working. But if I lock the cell, as I said before, $AC, $1, and pull it down, it'll be working just fine, I'd imagine. There we go. Okay, so that's our present value. Now the cumulated present value then is equals the previous cost to the next cost, or this year we're working on. So again, equals the previous cost to the next cost, and so on down through those years. So at the moment we're getting in year 2 a total cumulated cost of 5972.78, and I believe if I pull that down there, it'll just add that to that, and if I pull that next one down there, it'll add always to the previous, based on how the sequence of the formula is working. So that is that. If I want to use this in the same context for the installation costs or the non-installation costs, what I can do is I can copy the escalated maintenance cost there. Hopefully this will work. Copy that cell, and in here stick it in, Control V, double click. Instead of AC2 I want to use N1. Now it's really the same, I could leave it as is. In fact I probably will. Yeah, let's just leave it as is because it's still 3%. The P, it's not linked to that one, so I could actually drag that. Well, I could link it to that first year, that's fine, but really I should be using that one, which is A5 instead of P5. So just change P to A, and I is OK, click enter. So that would be our first number there, and so on as we move down through. It's just the exact same calculation applied to here. Again, as I said, instead of using, if I double click that formula, instead of using that rate there, I should probably be using that one, but it doesn't really make a difference, although I could change it. It was, instead of AC, it's N. There we go, links it to it, but it's the same answer. The total escalated cost, because there is only one escalated cost here, and that is the water charges, it's just equals. And again, if you pull that down, it'll just equal it. Now remember, you've got to go all the way down. And then the present value cost, let's say we've already done it. Here it is here, as in the present value formula. I'm going to copy it, see if it works. Might have to do a little bit of manipulation. And paste. Okay, so there we have our present value. Just double click it. The one, well, I said we should be using the A column. So instead of P, that should be A. And instead of AC, it should be N2 or N1. So let's change the AC to N. Now, I haven't changed any of the calculations here. I just made it applicable to this side of the calculation, even though the numbers that we were using on the right hand side would have been correct. And then I pull it down a little bit, but you guys are going to put it all the way down. So that's discounting back those particular costs based on their yearly value. If I just clicked on one of them here just to make sure it's working okay, yeah, to the power of that, to the power of that number, minus the A8, yes, multiplied by K8. That's correct. And then I'm going to use my accumulated, that's 0, because there's no installation cost. Then it'll be equals that plus that. And then I think if you pull it down, it should work. It's adding those two together. It's adding that third one onto it. It's adding that fourth one onto it. But when you have all these series of calculations carried out and pulled down, if you just pull that all the way down, it would work just fine. So that's that working for you. So go ahead and finish off the rest of those calculations, and we'll get to the yearly accumulated net present values in just 1 second. So take a bit of time and do that, and we'll pick up where we left off after you've calculated or finished those payments. Okay, so hopefully you've carried that out or completed that exercise. This is it here. You can see that the do not install system has accumulated present value that goes to 14,674.98, and that does equal, if I was to double click, the sum of all my present values, because obviously I'm adding together what has gone previous to it, so it should equal the same value. So just hit return. That's just a little check. On the other side, my present value, so this system is slightly better. You can see that 13,697.47. There isn't a massive saving. There'll be some sort of payback towards the end of that study period, because this present value is less than the previous option. And here we can have, or here we see all our present values filled down to give us our total 13,697, and their accumulated last payment should be the same. Okay, so to do a graph on that, I'm going to put them side by side. So starting with year 0, do not install. I just click equals, and go to that first cell, which is right there for my do not install cost. So I want to show these accumulated costs on a year-by-year basis, side by side. Pull down, and it should go from year to year, filling out there, and it does. So if I click that one, for example, it should be the equivalent to what's on that row over there, and it is. And do the same with the system to install system, and click the first cost, which is the installation cost, and click down. And obviously that first row there, this is an installation cost. There's nothing in that first year or that year 0 for the do not install, because we're not installing a system. But as we pull that down, we might get savings throughout, and we do. As you can see, that last year is slightly less than the last year of the do not install system. So what we're going to do there, we have a series of payments side by side. I'm going to highlight that series of payments right down to the end. Okay, there we go. Starting with the do not install and the system with, and then I'm going to go up here and click insert. So I'm on the home tab, clicking the insert tab, across to charts, which is right in the middle, and I'm going to use a line chart here because I want to see a cash flow forecast, and I'm going to drop down and click the first one. Okay, so click that, and there is my chart. Now I might want to just pull that down. Oh, I might want to just pull that down below the line a little bit. On down here. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger. That's good for the moment. And we can see there around, I suppose, year 24 or so, 24, 25, we've got a payback. So based on this system, based on this life cycle costing calculation, in terms of calculating net present values, which hopefully you'll understand from our lectures, what that means. We've got a payback based on the time value of money of 24 years for installing that system. Now, I suppose it gives us an opportunity to make a decision on whether we install or whether we don't install. And the logic is that if we change, for example, any one of these criteria, let's say, for example, I change the discount rate to 4%. I'll do it over here as well. 4%. How does it change our costs? Well, our net present value slightly changes here, slightly changes here. And there's actually a bigger difference, and our chart should actually change as well. So it actually brings back our payback period a little bit. Now we're talking about year 22 as a year to 24, 25. Same goes for the charges. Let's say, for example, I wanted to increase my water charges. For some reason, water charges gone up. So with all the linking in this sheet, everything's working out in terms of formula and linkages with formulas. If you change one thing, now I've changed all my 750s there, it should change everything, and it probably has. I can see that that is significantly more. It's 19,000, and there'll be a greater payback, I'd imagine, here, and there is. You can see it there. So the payback now, with that increase of €100 a year in water charges, is down to 15 years. So it's not a kind of a fixed thing. This system or this way of working just provides you a way of making decisions. And you might be variable testing what's going on here. But once you've set it up correctly, it's not a matter of doing the whole thing again, because it's linked, the cells are linked, the sheets are linked. Change one number and it should change and proliferate through that calculation. So that's exercise 2. So I'll put that up in Brightspace. I'll put the video up. I'll put the starting point up as in the blank spreadsheet, and then I'll put the solution up. So we'll move on next week to a further exercise. But until then, work your way through this.